Hello and welcome to the Commander's Quarters. I'm your host Mitch, glad to have you here. Here at the Commander's Quarters, we're all about Commander on a budget. Today's episode is going to be a $50 deck tech. When I say $50, I mean that is an overall deck cost. Both shipping and commanders that are $10 or less are going to be included in that cost, but basic lands will not be. Decks on this channel are built to be fun, inexpensive, and focused. If you want to learn more about what a focused commander deck is, check out this video here. On this deck tech, I'm going to take you through its strategy, the tactics, and how this deck wins. This show and episodes like this one are possible because of viewers like you. So if you're looking for some easy ways to help support the show, make sure you like this episode and share it with friends. And make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. Thank you to everyone who's already purchased our merchandise, it really does help support the channel. Another easy way to support this channel is by using our TCGplayer affiliate links. So make sure that you're looking for those links in the description whenever you're buying a deck or just individual cards. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support. And this episode's actually a patron selected deck tech. Once a month, patrons get to vote on what commander that they'd like to see in an upcoming deck tech. Whatever commander gets the most votes, wins. And the commander they chose was Carrick, son of Yawgmoth. Carrick is a 2/2 horror minion with lifelink that costs 4 Phyrexian black, Phyrexian black, Phyrexian black. He has for each black and a cost, you may pay 2 life rather than pay that mana. And whenever you cast a black spell, put a +1/+1 counter on Carrick, son of Yawgmoth. In Magic, Phyrexian mana is considered to be very broken. Being able to exchange life for mana so easily is really powerful. Not only does Carrick let you cheat on mana for your spells, but also your activated abilities too. Life may not be an infinite resource, but you start off with a ton in Commander. And Black has plenty of ways to gain life so you can keep going with this deck. So the more spells you cast, the more life you might lose, but you're also going to be casting spells that drain your opponents too. On top of that, Black has some ways that you can swap or even set life totals. So with this deck, we're going to heavily take advantage of that since we can get our life total very low. While this commander might cost 7 mana, it actually only costs 4 and 6 life. This is an extremely fast and powerful commander with the right build. So what's our strategy with this deck? Well, we're going to pay life to cast a lot of spells and activate abilities. Again, our life is a resource and we're going to use it to its fullest extent. And with this deck, getting down to a low life total is not a bad thing. And then how do we win with this deck? Well, we're going to swap life with our opponents and then drain them to death. The lower that we can get our own life total, the more danger our opponents are going to be in. There's even a way for us to finish off all of our opponents at once, but we'll tackle that in the deck tech. As with all Commander's Quarters decks, I'm going to take you through 10 different tactics that show you how the deck works and how we're going to win with it. So let's start off with tactic number 1, colorless creations. First up, we're going to be running 3 extremely efficient mana rocks with Soul Ring, Worn Power Stone, and Thran Dynamo. Soul Ring costs 1 and taps for 2, Worn Power Stone costs 3 and taps for 2, Thran Dynamo costs 4 and taps for 3. Now, each of these may only produce colorless mana, but that's completely fine for this deck. With this deck, Carrick can pretty much handle all the black mana for us. So when it comes to ramping, we only really care about ramping as quickly as we can, and these 3 mana rocks are the best at doing that. Now, every single mana rock can't be as efficient as these, but we want at least 1 mana for every 2 that we spend. So we're going to be running Guardian Idol, Fractured Power Stone, and Mind Stone, each of which costs 2 and tap for 1. On top of that, we can pay 1 to tap and sacrifice Mind Stone to draw a card. And we've also got Felwar Stone and Prismatic Lens, which do the same. Next up, there's Everflowing Chalice, which is an extremely flexible mana rock. If we pay 2 for it, it taps for 1. If we pay 4 for it, it taps for 2, and so on and so forth. Next up, we've got 3 mana rocks that cost 4 and tap for 2 with Sisay's Ring, Urgolem's Eye, and Hedron Archive. And by paying 2 and tapping and sacrificing Hedron Archive, we get to draw 2 cards. Next up, we've got 2 less efficient mana rocks, but they help us out in other ways. Unstable Obelisk costs 3 and taps for 1, and we can pay 7 to tap and sacrifice it to destroy target permanent. And then Paradise Plume costs 4, and when it comes into play, we choose a color. It says whenever a player plays a spell of the chosen color, you may gain 1 life. And then we can tap it to add 1 mana of the chosen color to our mana pool. Most of the time, we're going to choose black to gain some life while casting our spells. Again, this deck can cast a ton of spells very quickly, but it comes at a cost. Paradise Plume and other cards like it can help mitigate that cost for us. And finally, we've got Dark Ritual, which costs a black and adds black, black, black to our mana pool. And essentially with our commander in play, this is just 2 life for 3 mana. Now with our commander and all this ramp, we can cast a ton of spells in a turn, but we need to make sure that we've got cards to cast. So let's go through some ways to help with that in tactic number 2, Drawn In. First up, we've got 3 cards that can each draw us 2 cards for the cost of 2 life. And with Sign in Blood, we can actually target an opponent too if we like to. And Read the Bones provides some extra value because we scry 2 first. These spells are very efficient at exchanging life for cards, and we can make their mana cost even more efficient by just paying life instead of mana. So just keep that in mind for all the black cards that are brought up. Next up, there's Ambition's Cost and Ancient Craving, each of which draws 3 cards for 3 life. And then Siphon Mind says, each other player discards a card, you draw a card for each card discarded this way. So most of the time, we'll get to draw 3 cards with this. And then there's Promise of Power, which says you draw 5 cards and lose 5 life. And with our commander in play, we can essentially just cast this for 2 mana. Next up, there's Moonlight Bargain, which says look at the top 5 cards of your library. For each card, put that card into your graveyard unless you pay 2, then put the rest into your hand. So for the cards that are worth it, we're going to be willing to lose that 2 life. And Necrology is a bit of a strange one. It's an instant, but you can only cast it during your end step. It says, as initial cost to cast this spell, pay X life and draw X cards. So we do have to be careful with how much life we pay, but this can be an extremely effective card. This can dig really deep into our deck and get us the right cards for the situation that we're in. And finally, there's Balls of Citadel, which is an incredible card for this deck. With this deck, it essentially costs 3 and 6 life. It says you may look at the top card of your library anytime. You may play the top card of your library. If you cast a spell this way, pay life equal to its converted mana cost rather than pay its mana cost. And then tap, sacrifice 10 online permanents, each opponent loses 10 life. So this essentially lets us cast cards off the top of our library for free. It may cost us life, but in this deck, again, we are more than willing to pay it. Again, the lower that our life total gets, the more dangerous we can become. But outside of this and drawing cards, we've got other ways to get what we want. So it's time to move on to tactic number 3, Whispers of Power. First up, we've got 3 Transmute cards with Dimir Houseguard, Brainspoil, and Netherborn Phalanx. Each of these has Transmute for 1 black. So essentially by paying that, we can discard that card and then search our library for a card with the same converted mana cost and put it directly into our hand. So these are very specific but powerful tutors in this deck. We've got plenty of targets for each of these at their converted mana cost. And again, with our commander in play, these Transmute costs just cost 1 and 4 life. These cards can help us get the right card that we need for the situation that we're in. But we've also got some more traditional tutors like Diabolic Tutor and Mastermind's Acquisition. Being able to tutor for any card in our deck for 2 mana and 4 life is huge. Some slightly more expensive tutors are Razaketh's Right, Demonic Collusion, and Dark Petition. Razaketh's Right can actually be cycled if we need to. And Demonic Collusion we can get back by just discarding 2 cards. But Dark Petition actually might be the best tutor in this deck. It has Spell Mastery, so if there are 2 or more instant and/or sorcery cards in our graveyard, we add black to our mana pool. So if we're just casting this for 3 mana and 4 life, we essentially get that mana back. A free tutor in Magic is absolutely unheard of. Our final tutor might not be free, but it can still be very powerful. Behold the Beyond makes us discard our hand, but we can tutor for 3 cards, so this can easily set us up to win on its own. Now we've talked about our commander helping us cheat on mana costs for spells, but what about abilities? So now it's time to move on to tactic number 4, Unlimited Power. First up, there's Pestilence, which lets us pay a black to deal 1 damage to each creature and each player. But with our commander in play, we can instead just pay 2 life for that ability. An ability like this with a free activation is an incredibly powerful thing. It can help us clear the board, set our life total low, and finish off opponents. Just keep in mind that there has to be at least 1 creature on the battlefield to keep this around. And Pestilence Demon essentially does the exact same thing, but without that restriction. Next up, there's Greed, which lets us trade life for cards. Normally it costs a black and 2 life to draw a card, but with this deck we can just pay 4 life to draw a card. Essentially being able to draw cards for free is an extremely powerful thing, but generating mana for free might be even more powerful. Blood Celebrant has pay a black and 1 life, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. So with our commander in play, this is basically 3 life for 1 mana. Blood Celebrant can lead to some extremely explosive and deadly turns. Being able to activate abilities like these for free is a very powerful thing. But again, all of this does cost life, and we do have a limit on how much we can spend, so we need some ways that we can mitigate that life loss. Let's go through our first way to do that in tactic number 5, Extortion. First up, there's Thrall Parasite, Basilica Screecher, and Syndicate Enforcer, each of which have Extort. Extort is a triggered ability that says whenever you cast a spell, you may pay Orzhov. If you do, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain that much life. Just a quick reminder with Extort, that Orzhov symbol is actually in reminder text. Because of that, you can use these cards in a mono black deck. But anyways, Extort is extremely powerful in Commander, especially in this deck. Each time you Extort, you're going to be draining your opponents for 1 and basically gaining 3 life. Now, usually you'd have to pay a black for that effect, but with this deck, you can just pay 2 life. So basically, whenever you cast a spell, you can just pay 2 life, drain your opponents for 1, and gain 3 life. So on top of draining your opponents, you're netting 1 life. With the amount of spells that you can cast in this deck, this can add up quickly, and you can actually Extort for each creature that has Extort. So this makes the card Pontiff of Blight extremely deadly in this deck. It has Extort and gives all of your other creatures you control Extort. The more creatures you have in play, the more you drain your opponents each time you cast a spell. And again, the more life that you gain, the more you can use for mana. But there are other ways that we can drain our opponents too outside of Extort. Let's go through those ways now in tactic number 6, Feeling Drained. First up, there's Dread Presence, which has, whenever a swamp enters the battlefield under your control, choose 1. You draw a card and lose 1 life, or Dread Presence deals 2 damage to any target and you gain 2 life. So this can either help us dig deeper or gain back some life. And then there's Palace Siege, which says, when it enters the battlefield, choose Khans or Dragons. With Khans, at the beginning of your upkeep, return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. And with Dragons, at the beginning of your upkeep, each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. Depending on the situation that we're in, either of these effects can be fantastic in this deck. Next up, there's Blood Tithe, which essentially makes everyone else lose 3 life and we gain 9. And then Gonti's Machinations pretty much does the exact same thing. It says whenever you lose life for the first time each turn, you get an energy. And then by paying 2 energy and sacrificing it, you get that Blood Tithe effect. Gaining 9 life can be huge. But an even bigger way to gain life might come from Essence Harvest. It says target player loses X life and you gain X life, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. Our commander does grow every single time we cast a black spell. On top of that, he has lifelink, so he can actually gain us life. And Essence Harvest is a great way to take advantage of that power as well. We're going to be casting a ton of spells in this deck, so Tendrils of Agony can come in huge. It says target player loses 2 life and you gain 2 life, and it has Storm. So the more spells spells that we cast in that turn, the more that we can drain our opponents. But perhaps the best way to drain everyone comes with Gary. When Great Merchant of Asphodel, otherwise known as Gary, enters the battlefield, each opponent loses X life, where X is your devotion to black. Then you gain life equal to the life lost this way. Even with just our commander in Grey Merchant, this is going to drain our opponents for a ton. Each of them will lose 5 life and we'll gain 15. But the more black permanents that we have in play, the better. Not only do these drain spells keep us alive, but they also can finish off our opponents. But outside of draining our opponents, we've got other ways to keep us going. Let's go through those ways in tactic number 7, no malice. First up, there's Tendrils of Corruption, which is going to deal X damage to our creature and we gain X life, where X is the number of swamps we control. The later the game goes, the better this card gets for us. Next up, there's Elixir of Immortality, which we can pay 2 and tap it to gain 5 life, then we shuffle it in our graveyard into our library. So not only can this gain us life, but it can get us back some key pieces. They may go back into our library, but again, we've got a ton of tutors to get them back. Next up, there's Prism Ring and Staff of the Death Magus. Prism Ring is going to gain us 1 life whenever we cast a black spell. And Staff does the exact same thing, but also gains us life whenever a swamp enters the battlefield under our control. This life gain can easily add up throughout the game and really mitigate our life loss. And Demon's Horn might be even better because it gains us life whenever any player casts a black spell. Finally, there's Sangromancer, which says, whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, you may gain 3 life, and whenever an opponent discards a card, you may gain 3 life. The amount of incidental life gain this can get us can be huge. Again, we want to cast a ton of spells with this deck and use life as a resource as best as we can. But once we're set up, we want to drop our life total as low as we can get it. Let's see why in tactic number 8, get a life. First up, there's Magus of the Mirror, which we can tap and sacrifice it to exchange life totals with target opponent, but we can only activate this ability during our upkeep. So Magus will have to stick around for a turn, but if it does, one of our opponents is in big trouble. Again, we've got plenty of ways to tutor and manipulate our life total too. With something like Blood Celebrant in play, we can get our life total very low. Then we can use this to exchange life totals with the opponent that's got the most life. We can then easily take them out with the Drain spell and keep going. A repeatable and more resilient version of this comes from Soul Conduit. By paying 6 and tapping it, we can make 2 target players exchange life totals. Again, with the amount of ramp that we have in this deck, it's not unrealistic to think that we can cast this and pay 6 and tap it in the same turn. Now, this card is fantastic in helping us finish off one opponent at a time, but by far the most effective way for us to win comes from our Golden Pig. The Golden Pig is going to be the number 1 card out of our 99, and the Golden Pig for this deck is Repay in Kind. It's a sorcery for 5 black, and it says each player's life total becomes the lowest life total among all players. So basically, we just make our life total as low as we can get it, and we make everyone else join us. And from there, it's pretty much just going to take us 1 drain spell to win. If we're set up properly, this can be a finisher that comes out of absolutely nowhere. With the amount of tutors that we're running in this deck, we can get the exact pieces that we need to make this effective. The more we abuse our life total, the more this card benefits us. It's extremely powerful and it can win us the game at once, and that's what makes it the Golden Pig. But outside of swapping life totals, we've got some other ways to finish off opponents too. So it's time to tackle those in tactic number 9, Lucky Number. First up, there's Sanguine Bond, which says whenever you gain life, target opponent loses that much life. As you've seen, we're running a ton of ways to gain life in this deck, and with this, we can turn that life gain into a weapon. And with this in play, our drain spells can be even deadlier. For example, let's say that we have this in our commander in play. If we cast Grey Merchant of Asphodel, our devotion to black is going to be 7. That means that each opponent loses 7 life and we gain 21 life. So in total, one of our opponents is losing 28 life from that one spell cast. Another way that we can finish off our opponents though is with Triskaidekaphobia. It says at the beginning of your upkeep, choose 1. Each player with exactly 13 life loses the game, then each player gains 1 life. Or each player with exactly 13 life loses the game, then each player loses 1 life. So this helps us in a few ways. Early on, we can use this to gain a life each turn, but later on it can be very deadly, because now we essentially just have to get our opponents down to 13. We can do that with this, our drain spells, and our life swap. And thanks to our commander, we can easily dodge 13 ourselves by just losing life. With this in play, our opponents are going to have to adapt their mentality to avoid the number 13, but throughout the game, we're going to have to adapt as well. So let's go through some cards that can help with that in tactic number 10, Adapt and Overcome. First up, there's Font of Agonies, which can be a great way to control the board. It says whenever you pay life, put that many blood counters on Font of Agonies, and then by paying 1 and a black and removing 4 blood counters from it, we can destroy target creature. With this in play, it's going to be hard for opponents to justify putting creatures on the board. And if our opponents already have a lot of creatures, we can just cast Reaver Demon. When it comes into play, if we cast it from our hand, we destroy all non-artifact, non-black creatures, and they can't be regenerated. And with this deck, we can essentially just cast this for 4 mana and 8 life. Next up, there's Swiftfoot Boots, which is a fantastic way to protect our commander with hexproof, and it gives him haste too. And finally, we're running Ill-Gotten Gains, which is a great way to get some key pieces back. It says, exile Ill-Gotten Gains, each player discards their hand, then returns up to 3 cards from their graveyard to their hand. Carrick is extremely powerful and push commander in the right build. But now that we've gone through the spells in this deck, let's go on to the mana base. First up, there's Radiant Fountain, which gains us 2 life when it comes into play and taps for a colorless. Next up, there's Baron Moor, which enters the battlefield tapped, taps for a black, and can cycle for a black. And then there's Cabal Stronghold, which taps for a colorless, and we can pay 3 and tap it to add black for each basic swamp we control. And the rest of our mana base is very simple with 32 swamps. And now that we've gone through every single card in this deck, let's do a quick price check. A quick reminder that our deck costs are calculated using TCGplayer optimization, optimizing with even heavily played and damaged cards because those cards need a home too. The average Carrick EDH rec deck will set you back $463.77. Our decks can be much more affordable at $49.72. And just a quick reminder that neither of these costs include the cost of the commander. At the time of this recording, Carrick's price was over $10, so it had to be excluded. Again, the price of this deck is the price that I got for it on the day that I'm recording. If you want to see a breakdown of this deck's cost, check out the link in the description. Keep in mind that prices can and will fluctuate and change over time. But with these deck costs, I want to be as transparent as I possibly can. Again, Commander's Quarters decks are built to be tuned and focused within their budget, but there are always ways that we can improve on them. So let's go through some reasonable upgrades now to see what some of those ways just might be. First up, we're going to add in Necropotence and take out Read the Bones. It's just a fantastic and efficient way to draw a ton of cards. Then let's add in Vilis, Broker of Blood, and take out Succumb to Temptation. With this deck especially, Vilis will draw us a ton of cards. Next up, let's add in Beseech the Queen and take out Demonic Collusion. It's a fantastic tutor that we can actually cast for free in this deck. And then let's add in Cryptcast and take out Dread Presence. Cryptcast not only has Extort, but it basically doubles our swamps. Next up, let's add in Exsanguinate and take out Essence Harvest. It's an amazing drain spell that can gain us a ton of life. And finally, let's add an Aetherflux Reservoir and take out Triskaidectophobia. It can just gain us a ton of life throughout the game and be a finisher too. And with that, this show is coming to a close, so it's my turn to hear from you. So in the comments below, let me know what your thoughts on this deck tech are. And make sure that you're following us on social media for more updates and sneak peeks on future episodes. Links to our social media accounts can be found in the description. Also in the description below is a link to the Commander's Quarters Patreon page, and I just want to say a quick thank you to the patrons who have subscribed so far. There are many benefits to being a patron for the Commander's Quarters, including being able to vote on future Commanders for deck techs. There's even a general level tier where you get your own personalized deck tech dedicated to you. I truly couldn't do this without all of your support, so from the bottom of my heart, thank you. If you haven't already, make sure that you like and subscribe to the channel. Here at the Commander's Quarters, we're all about budget Commander. So while you're at it, go ahead and check out some of our other types of episodes. And with that, I'm out of here. Thanks again and have a good one.